Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. This is Thursday, March 18th, and this is the second of our two updates on the coronavirus outbreak here in Westchester County. I'm joined here, as I always am, by Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins, and we have a couple of other special guests who will be joining us today on different points. The mayor of the village of Pleasantville, Peter Scherer, is with us, and Chief Inspector of our Department of Public Safety, John Hodges, is with us here today. We're both going to include them on a couple of the topics that we're going to cover today. We'll go straight to the numbers as quickly as we can. We try to give the updated information as early as we can in the program. So if you're waiting to see how we're doing on the spread of the infection, you can track that. We do have a dashboard that's available that will give you some of the numbers of cases. Unfortunately, we don't have broken down by community the number of fatalities or the number of hospitalizations, which help give a full picture as to where we are with the infection. But as of today's, the numbers that are on the New York State tracker, we show that we have 5,364 active cases of coronavirus in Westchester County. That number has slightly inched down in the last couple of days after a slight jump up. When you compare it to a week ago, we had 5,584 cases. That's a drop of about 200 in the last week. 2 weeks ago, we had 6,019 cases, and the week before that, 6,145 cases. So it does show now a 7-week period of continual reduction, although in the last 2 weeks, it's been a very slight reduction, not a significant number, but it is reduction in terms of the total number of active cases. That's on the basis of 114,402 individuals that have at some point in time over the last year plus tested positive for COVID, and right now 5,364 of them are active cases, and we have issued over 2.2 million tests in Westchester County alone for COVID, and that's a very significant number. Obviously, people are being tested more than once, depending on the circumstances that we face. Our most recent number on hospitalizations date back to Tuesday, where we had 269 people hospitalized for COVID. As I've often said, the number of active cases represents the breadth of the infection. The depth of the infection is how many people are hospitalized. So 269 as a number, we were at a peak about 6-7 weeks ago of 588. So we're down 300 cases in the aggregate over the course of these 7 weeks. That's good news. That's more than half less number of people hospitalized. But that is a trend line that is good. It has slowed again in the last few weeks. A week ago, we were 264 hospitalized, so that's hardly much of a difference. But 2 weeks ago, 330 people hospitalized, so that is a good sign. The less people that are hospitalized and the less that wind up being severely affected enough to lose their life. We've lost 2,159 Westchester residents to the pandemic. We lost 4 overnight from the prior night, and in the last week, the number of fatalities total 20. That number for a week total is down from what we've seen in prior weeks. The week prior to that, we were a little higher than that, 23, 25, the week before that. But every death, I have to say this every time we say this, every death is a human tragedy. It's an individual. You think of my own parents, people I know that have died. So we don't want to ever treat people as if they're statistics. But the numbers are important to know to determine what the trend is. If there is anything encouraging in the numbers, even if it's a slow diminution, is that we've been watching to see the variants that are out there. We're told that there are mutations of the disease, the UK mutation. There's one that's identified with South Africa, one identified with Brazil. We are not medical scientists here in the county government. We just repeat what we understand the professionals to tell us, and that these mutations, these variations or variants, represent things that are more communicable rather than more severe. And if that is true, it does not appear that we're getting more communicability. We're getting less. That could also be a reason of the vaccinations that are happening. But at least for the moment, that's where we're at today. 5,364 active cases, 269 hospitalized, and most recently an aggregate of 2,159 fatalities. Now, the vaccination numbers are hard to come by in the aggregate because there are so many different places now that people can get a vaccination. And when we give total vaccination numbers of Westchester residents, we're including wherever that resident got the vaccine. You might have gotten a Javits in the city or Aqueduct. They might have taken a trip to upstate New York. We talked about some of those communities the past couple of weeks that are at far distance. Some people have gone to Binghamton and other places, Utica, to become vaccinated. It also includes vaccinations that are done at pharmacies, numbers that we don't receive to track specifically how many people have been vaccinated at a pharmacy. It doesn't include the state pop-ups that have happened now over the last month and a half, nor for that matter, as we have now started, county pop-up vaccination centers. And a pop-up is simply a temporary vaccination area. It's a place that's up for a day or two. It's tied to a particular entity. We have a particular healthcare partner in providing it. The state has done this now well over a month. The county just started it last week. We did one in New Rochelle, the New Rochelle Housing Authority. We did one in Yorktown at the community center on Commerce Street that involved people who also live in Somers and Yorktown, other parts of northern Westchester. So the combination of vaccinations done at hospitals for hospital employees, for these pop-up temporary vaccination locations, and then also those that were done at pharmacies are separate from the major vaccination centers. The major vaccination centers are Westchester County Center, run by the state, although the county's a partner there. John Hodges and the people from the Department of Public Safety do a terrific job in helping to deal with traffic and the flow of people from outside the building to get inside the building. We directly deal with vaccinations at two clinics, the standing one that we have here in downtown White Plains on Court Street, and the one we established over a month ago at the community college at their gymnasium, which is a larger facility, can accommodate more people. And then we also track what's happening with the Yonkers Armory, which is a state FEMA-sponsored large area for mass vaccinations as well. We intend in the long run for that to be the equal of the county center in terms of getting people through. With that, since the vaccination centers have opened, 115,800 vaccinations have been issued at the county center. That includes first and second doses. So the total number of people vaccinated is not 115,000, a little bit less than that because some people had both shots there so far. But 115,000 plus vaccinations at the county center, 23,000 at the two clinics that we operate, and at this point, in its way growing, Yonkers Armory at 15,000, over 15,000 vaccinations. Those numbers are only going to grow in the weeks to come. We've moved the county center originally from about 1,000 vaccinations a day now to 2,000 plus vaccinations a day. That capacity for growth exists at the Armory in Yonkers, and it exists at the community college in the gymnasium. The county center operates 7 days a week. The two county clinics operate 6 days a week. And we believe we're past the point of worrying about weather impacting vaccine supply. That was an issue 2 weeks ago when there was a terrible cold snap, you may recall, in Texas. It also affected other southern states, one of them being Tennessee, where Moderna is headquartered, and it was difficult for them to get their product to us. We think we're past that point now, so that we'll have very little of the weather-related cancellations that did occur earlier in the month of March and toward the tail end of February as well. So a total of 150,000 plus, 155,000 plus vaccinations issued. As that number rises, we would expect to see the infection number drop because more people are vaccinated, then they won't get the disease. It won't spread to those individuals. The larger the pool of people that are vaccinated, the less number of them. You'd have a lesser number of infections, a smaller number of active cases, and then ultimately it goes away entirely, we hope. We don't know yet if the vaccination is going to have to be done every year. All of this is medical science will tell us. But we're cautiously optimistic that we're going in the right direction. Westchester has done very well for itself. I understand that we're working on the basis of 16% of the population of Westchester County has now been fully vaccinated, meaning 2 shots of either Pfizer or Moderna or 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson. And then whatever that takes, that makes you fully vaccinated. That's 16% of our population. That's up 3% from last week when we reported 13%. Then we reported there was an additional 11% of people that have had 1 shot and they're waiting for the second shot. And that number now is a little bit higher than that. So we think the aggregate number of people that have been covered is over 30%. And over the course of the next few weeks, if we continue on the same pace of vaccination with second shots, we'll be approaching 40% of Westchester residents that are vaccinated, fully vaccinated. That's very good news. That is not the universal number. Westchester has been fortunate. We have a couple of major centers for vaccination, and we have folks who live here who are to the greater extent able to get on computers, know how to manage the system. That's not universally available everywhere. In parts of New York City and parts of rural parts of the state, those numbers aren't equivalent. So our mission isn't to worry just about our home county, but to be part of a system that vaccinates everybody and tries to get this pandemic behind us. The faster we don't have to put on masks, the faster we don't have to social distance. We can go to restaurants and movie theaters theaters, the better it is for the economy and the better for society. Now, there are additional things to talk about from a county basis, but we always try to bring this down to a local level. A couple of days ago, we had the pleasure of Mary Marvin with us here, the mayor of the village of Bronxville. She talked a little about her Bronxville experience. We had the mayor of the village of Ossining, Rika Levin, was here to talk about Ossining. And now I'm going to ask the mayor of the village of Pleasantville, who has been our guest here before, Peter Scherer, to talk a little bit about the incidents of things in Pleasantville, what they're working on, how they're handling it. And, of course, once you give the mayor the podium, the mayor can talk about anything he wants to. It's entirely open to him. I would point out Peter was just reelected this past Tuesday for another term as mayor, so we congratulate him on his successful reelection. And, Mr. Mayor, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, George, and thank you for inviting me again. When I was here the last time many months ago, it was not my expectation that 13 months into this there'd be a cause for me to come back. Painfully, there is. But as you've just heard from the county executive, the view from Pleasantville is cautiously optimistic. The weather has broken. We're starting to see some improvement in our numbers, and some good stuff is happening. It is a huge shot in the arm, not only to our local economy, but also to our local spirit that the Jacob Burns Film Center, shuttered since last March, is going to reopen at the end of April. So that's great news, not only important for the Burns and for all of the businesses that benefit from that activity, but important just as a sort of psychological suggestion that better times are ahead and that we're inching in the direction of normal. A shout out to the Burns for a project they just undertook and which they turned on last week, which is called Projecting Light Through Darkness. They've used their otherwise dark windows and facade to produce a light show. And so if you find yourself anywhere near Pleasantville, New York, you should drive past the Burns anytime after dark and see this animated facade in a place that has been dark for so long, a precursor to the real rebirth of activity there in the Burns April 30th. So that's all good news, and yet it's leavened by the reality that every day we get new positives. We're certainly in a circumstance in Pleasantville, like pretty much everywhere in the county, that a pretty significant percentage of our households have had one or more family members affected by COVID. And when you count the folks who have been sidelined by a quarantine because of a potential exposure, the impact has been huge. We're looking at the school district reopening for full-time live teaching, with kids going back to school every day after the spring break. Also fantastic news, but nervous-making for all of us, including the school district. We're at work right now, the village and the school district, on a joint Mask Up campaign to say what I hope is clear to everybody, but certainly my message from Pleasantville. We need everybody to keep this positive momentum going by wearing a mask everywhere they possibly can. The progress is clear, it's real, and it's fragile. So we want to get kids back to school and staying in school. We want to get people back in the movie theaters and going there freely. We want people eating in our restaurants, shopping in our stores, able to walk the streets and use our parks in the way we all remember. The best way to do that is to maintain our vigilance and to maintain social distancing and to keep those masks on. Vaccines are increasingly available. We've encouraged everybody to get it. We've got a little bit of vaccine resistance among some folks, as I know exists all over the country. The message certainly from Peter Scherer is, I got vaccine number 1 the moment I was in an eligible category, and I encourage everybody else to do the same. So good news overall, but it really is important that we maintain our vigilance. So lastly, I just want to report, as I think you all know, this Westchester Together message has been proven every single day for 13 months. So thanks very much to the county executive, to the deputy county executive, and to the entire team here in White Plains. I think it is fair to say across the aisle, whatever political persuasion you come from, this has been a moment when everybody has locked arms on behalf of our county. So thank you all.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. We want to touch on a couple of the rules and policies that are at hand that we're facing here as the state announces them. We've talked about this at each turn. The governor, through his executive order authority, has basically set the parameters by which we in every corner of the state deal with this crisis. And it involved at the outset what industries got shut down and when they were reopened, what kind of testing model we had, what kind of data information we had that we could share. We've tried to share everything that we can that we have access to now in terms of the vaccines and the distributions. But there are a series of public policies that affect specific businesses. We mentioned just the last couple of weeks that the governor lifted his prohibition on amusement parks, which allows us now to start the process of preparing to open Playland this year. Shortened season, whole different level of protocol there, but at least to open it. And now he's come out with some additional procedures, policies on wedding receptions, catered events, and I'm going to ask Ken Jenkins to walk through these so that people have an idea of what this represents to that portion of the society. Ken.
Thanks, George. As the county executive stated, as of March 15th, the state has allowed wedding receptions and catered events to be able to be resumed. And these are very specific instructions, and that's why I'm actually going to read them. So anyone that is hosting a wedding or a catered event must follow the very, very strict health and safety protocol, including the following. First, the venue itself is restricted to 50% capacity with no more than 150 attendees per event. So for those larger scale facilities that have multiple rooms, the maximum is 150 attendees per each one of those rooms, not to exceed 50% of the total capacity of the venue. Every attendee has to have proof of a recent negative test result or proof of your immunization prior to the event. And that is something that the event is going to make you present to those individuals. So it's not something that you're just going to be able to say. You will have to provide proof of that recent negative test result, and the recent meaning within the 72 hours prior to the event is what we've been told, and proof of your vaccinations. That means for those folks taking the Johnson & Johnson Janssen version, that is 2 weeks after that one immunization, or for the Pfizer Moderna folks, 2 weeks after the second dose that you receive prior to the event. You're going to sign in with your contact information required in case there's contact tracing required. So a lot of people have asked the county executive about whether or not your vaccination made you immune to the virus, and Dr. Amler came in and explained to us it does not, but it certainly prevents serious illness and death, and that is really the things that we need to continue to look for, and that is why the next thing is still always required. Mask being worn, as Mayor Scherer said, at all times except when seated, eating, or drinking, and the venue itself will make sure that there's spacing between the various tables. The venue has to notify local health departments of large events above the social gathering limit in advance. So whatever that social gathering limit is, they're going to have to let people know in advance. And finally, you'll be able to dance. County executive loves dancing. Ceremonial and socially distanced dancing allowed in designated areas on the dance floor with specific individuals. And again, as we've been continuing to talk about, county executives talk about this from the very beginning. Mayor Scherer just reinforced it again. With all of us paying attention and being vigilant is the best way for us to work through this together. Continue to mask up, stay your social distance, and keep washing those hands. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for the reference about dancing. Praise from the master is praise indeed. But I think it's important to recognize that the county government, I've shared this a couple times before, we've talked about this in terms of schools, and it applies to other things. The county government has authority when authorized by the state to do certain things. You may remember about 2 months ago, the governor gave to county governments through the Department of Health the authority to work with school districts on allowing for sports, high-risk sports as it was defined, football, hockey, basketball, wrestling, a few sports like that. And when given the authority to make those decisions, working with other county executives, bipartisanly, Republican, Democrats together, we were able to allow for that. And you're seeing basketball, now we're getting ready for football season. That authority was given us. There's authority that has not been given us, and when Ken goes through these specific regs, what we're basically saying is the state wants these things to be done a certain way. They have the legal authority to do it this way, and we, the county, have to administer against those rules. If the day comes where the state says, Westchester County and every other county, you could now make the decision of what's open or what's closed, we will make those decisions, as we have with our golf courses, which are now open for play. And they're easily defensible because golf is a socially distanced sport. But again, these rules and these regulations are not created by the county government. They come from the state and the governor's office and his health team. And our job is to try to administer them, but to administer them with an eye to open facilities safely, not to use them as an excuse to keep them closed. And we believe, if the medical professionals are correct, that we open them with certain provisions and we administer those provisions properly, that they can stay open in a healthy fashion and that we can avoid spreading the disease, which is really what we're trying to accomplish here. We don't want to see the shutdown of the economy. We want to see the economy open and grow, done in a proper fashion. So that's why all those regs are important. Today we talked about these particular issues and areas. There are other ones that affect other different parts of the society, and we will continue to try to work with the state to implement this thing. And again, if the trend lines continue in a good direction, we hope to see a better spring than last year, a better summer than last year, and a fall that is better than last year and starts looking normal as soon as possible. The sooner the better. I want to touch on a non-COVID related issue. We do have information. We always show each one of these presentations about how you can get online. It's the same basic hotline number and the various websites that you can check on, click on, am I eligible, click on to determine the forms you have to do. We scroll those even as we continue to talk about other topics. So if you haven't seen this report before and you see these for the first time, take note of them and follow up on them as you see fit. We want to mention an issue that's very much on our minds because of what's happened most recently, what's happened in Atlanta, and that is the evidence of crimes that have at their source potentially and in actuality hate toward an ethnic group, and in this case, Asian Americans. There is a real concern after what we saw happen in Atlanta. Clearly, this was violence against individuals, violence against women, violence against individuals who identified as Asian American. And we have to be vigilant for crime in any of its forms and understand the motivation so that if the motivation has one element to it, we can address it and focus on that element. If it has a different element to it, that we deal with that as well and to try to understand that. We turn to our police professionals, and we have a very professional Westchester County Police Department. It's known as the Department of Public Safety. It's headed by Commissioner Sheriff Thomas Gleason. He has underneath him two key chief inspectors, Chris Calabrese and John Hodges, who you're going to see in a second. And we have other individuals, captains of great experience and lieutenants and so forth. When we deal with dealing with the bias crimes, the crimes which are directed at individuals who represent presence in certain demographic groups, there's an effort now to make sure that we're speaking up and we're having crimes reported so that they can be properly investigated. I think it's critical to understand that an investigation is always important when indicting somebody on a crime. We're a nation of laws, not a nation of men, and we don't make subjective decisions if we can take the time and do the proper investigation. And that requires, and you see this every night if you watch Law & Order, it's not every night of the week, that there are two parts of the criminal justice system. And the first part is what the police do to investigate and provide information about crimes, and then what the prosecutorial piece does in order to prosecute those crimes, get indictments, and then, of course, beyond that, if a person is guilty, the correction systems to incarcerate where that's the appropriate punishment for the crime. But before all of that is an effort to make sure that people understand, and in ways that they can appreciate, how important it is to understand and see and speak up whenever there is a crime that has been committed. And it can be difficult. There's a fear factor that goes into certain criminal behavior, and people look at a certain circumstance and they ask themselves, is it in my best interest to report this? Am I afraid? Will there be retaliation? Will I be believed? Will I, as the victim, become the spotlighted individual rather than the individual that perpetrated this? There's a host of different things to deal with. And right now, because we're dealing in the Asian American issue as the most prominent recent addition, we have put together graphics in various languages, English, of course, and then in Korean, in Mandarin, Chinese, Japanese, also in Spanish, for our Speak Up Westchester campaign. And if you go on hashtag Speak Up Westchester, it's designed to encourage residents to speak up if they become a victim of crime or if they witness a crime, a hate crime specifically, a bias or hate incident. There are different gradations, and we'll let the courts and the legal community determine the degree of severity that leads to what type of sanction and what type of prosecution. But our new county district attorney, Miriam Roca to be specific, has taken this on as a major initiative of her tenure. She has taken leadership on this, and we congratulate the DA for stepping forward on this, launching the social media campaign of Speak Up Westchester, and to do it again in ways that many people in our community for whom English is not their primary language or their first language, that they understand that they too have a right to protect their own interests by speaking up. The Westchester County Human Rights Commission has launched a new webpage to report incidents as well. I believe we have a graphic down there that will show westchestergov.com/bias reporting. But the district attorney has a hotline that's been established. It's 995-TIPS, T-I-P-S, or 995-8477. You can also go through their website, which is westchesterda.net. But that hotline number, 995-TIPS, should be one that's easy to remember, and she will assign experienced assistant district attorneys to follow up on tips and complaints received. We've had a very good working relationship between the county police and all of the local police departments, about 40 local police departments of varying size and scope. Yonkers has the largest municipal police force. Buchanan, I think, has the smallest, and there's a range of them in between. Westchester County Police does the local policing in the village of Mount Kisco and also has a role to play in the town of Cortland. And then we provide a wide range of backup services to complement what the local municipal police departments do. And that relationship has been built strongly over the years by many past commissioners and chiefs and captains and lieutenants in the county police department. All of that comes into play when we're dealing with hate crimes because jurisdictionally, Westchester County's law enforcement arm is focused on policing the parkways and the highways, county-owned parks and other land, and in those places where we have municipal responsibility by agreement, and that would be Mount Kisco and Cortland at the stage of the game. But we obviously condemn any act that targets a person or group because of their actual or their perceived race, color, national origin, ethnicity, ancestry, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, age, disability. All of those categories in law are identified as protected categories where you cannot take prejudicial action against somebody because of their age, their religion, their ancestry, their identifiable race, color, national, and all of these things are protected categories and allow an individual to know that they cannot be treated separate from the proper means of treatment by being in one of those different categories. Most recently, Asian Americans have been targeted for these kind of actions, and we leave it to both the law enforcement community and the prosecutorial community to bring to justice those people that have committed crimes along these areas. Not every hate incident violates the law, but they should still be reported. And you have the 911 tool to report crimes of a certain nature, the 995 TIPS line that we've mentioned, and of course the Human Rights Commission is part of that. Now, when we look at a crime after the fact, the investigative element of it and the punishment of it if the individual is guilty, we're dealing with it once it's happened. What do we do in advance? How do we do something that's positive in advance? Chief John Hodges, on behalf of Commissioner Gleason and the department, is identifying some activities that they're going to take within the county police department. And of course, John Hodges is an experienced lawman. He comes from a family of prominent members in law enforcement, and he brings a lot of expertise to this. So I'm going to ask Chief Hodges to share a little bit about the activities of the county police department in this area. John? Going that way? Very good. You get it.
Well, County Executive, thank you very much. As the County Executive said, my name is John Hodges. I'm currently the Chief of Investigative Services for Department of Public Safety, otherwise known as Westchester County Police. And actually, I sometimes find it hard to believe that it's 38 years already. since I started my law enforcement career. Don't know where the time goes. So as the CE mentioned, and I'm sure everyone has heard and seen in the news issues related to hate and bias crimes and hate and bias related incidents, and most recently Asian Americans who have been targeted by individuals as part of hate and bias incidents and crimes, and most notably what happened in Atlanta. So the interesting thing is that we just had a meeting yesterday. So as part of what the county executive described is a very complex series of relationships and a strategy that we've put together, and specifically now, but we've been looking at this for quite some time. Hate and bias crimes and incidents have been an issue, and they've become more prevalent, as you have all seen and heard in the media. One of the things that we've been involved in for quite some time is the counterterrorism zone strategies within New York State. So Westchester and Putnam comprise counterterrorism zone 3. We are tasked with having monthly meetings. We have recently revamped the meeting with the various different departments, and we'll talk about that in a minute, how many police departments, how we're coordinating. But the CTZ3 Executive Committee through the Westchester County Chiefs Association is now really being managed under the purview of our intelligence unit, which comprises which our real-time crime center is embedded in. So just yesterday, actually, we had a meeting with our partners in CTZ3, and as part of that, all of the departments have field intelligence officers who are involved. We're also involved with New York State. When I say New York State, it's the NYSIC. So that's the New York State Intelligence Center, and also our partners in the FBI. So we just had a briefing yesterday and discussed a lot of issues regarding hate and bias crimes. And we have streamlined the process for reporting. Now, the county executive mentioned regarding crimes. He mentioned regarding the district attorney's office. He mentioned Human Rights Commission. So the challenge for us in law enforcement and with the various police departments is to put together a model where we can get comprehensive, timely data, and that is being done through the Real-Time Crime Center. We have put together the district attorney's office, all of the various chiefs and commissioners from all the towns, villages, and cities, and we have weekly calls with them. As well as the Human Rights Commission, and we have had put together a reporting process so that all information related to hate and bias crimes and to expand that category to hate and bias incidents is now all going to funnel into one central database that everybody has access to, and it's going to be run through the county's Real-Time Crime Center. And it's interesting to note that the county executive mentioned all of the municipal entities and the respective police departments. We now have every single police department in the county, cities, towns, villages, every single one participate and have a person who's assigned either on a full-time or a part-time basis to the Real-Time Crime Center. And that's important because the collaboration of information in a timely manner is very important. So what I want to stress is that if people see or hear of any hate, bias crime, or hate and bias related incidents, they should report it. And whether they report it through the Human Rights Commission or whether they report it through a hotline, I would encourage them to go through their local police department. We are going to take all of that information, including where we are the primary police agency, whether it's in Cortland or in Mount Kisco, and we are going to take that information. We're going to put it into a database that all of the chiefs, the commissioners, and the district attorney have access to. That is going to facilitate the arrest and prosecution of anybody who commits a crime. It is also going to give us intelligence that is crucial for us to be able to look for and identify any groups that are operating and any incidents that are taking place. So hopefully, maybe we can prevent them from happening, and that's going to heavily, weigh on the intelligence side of how we investigate and look at these incidents. And this includes all of our partners, because all of the chiefs and commissioners now participate in weekly calls where we share all of this information, and that's key. So by taking it, so whatever mechanism it's reported, it's going to get funneled into a database. Now, the interesting thing is I mentioned also about the counterterrorism and the NYSIC, the New York State Intelligence Center. The county, in also in concert with other police agencies, participates in something called Operation Safeguard. So we will be reaching out, or various local police departments will be reaching out to people in this particular case, especially in the Asian American community, to identify areas, locations that they think are important, and we're going to take those and put them into a database. So we are reaching out now through the Asian American Advisory Board and members of the community and the various police departments. I also just want to mention that if anything jumps out and there is anything that somebody wants to report and there are any specific threats, don't be afraid to call 911. The police departments are staffed 24/7, and so is our real-time crime center. So that if there is something that has to be operated, dealt with in a timely manner, we will. But essentially, that's how we are dealing with this issue and making this, a comprehensive. I mean, as the sign says here, I mean, it's everyone in together, and it's very important that we work with all of our various police agencies.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Hodges. Excuse me. Thank you, Chief Hodges, and to the men and women of the department, please convey to them our appreciation for their professional work. We rely on them every single day to protect Westchester residents, and we hope to continue to be able to do everything we can to do that for the people of this county. Just to mention one final comment about bias, and I have one other point to mention, and that is that this is the week where those of us who have Irish extraction, there are a couple of others in the room, where we celebrate St. Patrick's Day. We haven't been able to celebrate it the way we traditionally do. Next year, we'll see you on McLean Avenue. And I also have Italian-American heritage, and this is St. Joe's Day coming up in a couple of days. And so this is a time where, for those of us who share those ethnicities, we have great pride in those ethnicities. And the stories that I've been told of the immigrant generations in my family is that when they reached American shores, they too were prejudiced against, that there was no love for the Italian Americans when they came here, nor love for the Irish American when they came here, and they were prejudiced against and treated a certain way with bias. Over 100 years, those two ethnicities have become incorporated into the American mainstream, and you'll see people of both Irish and Italian background in all sorts of endeavors of life, hard work and discipline and generations of achievement from the original immigrants to the sons and grandsons and granddaughters, great-grandsons and great-granddaughters today. We now face that same prejudice directed toward other people who've come to these shores. They came for the same reason that my grandfather on one side and my great-grandfather on one side and grandfather on the other side came. They came for economic opportunity. They want a better life for their family. They came because America is a land where you have freedom and you can express your opinions. In the old countries of Europe, as they are in other parts of the globe, there was an oppression, and you couldn't have that freedom, and you had a class structure that you couldn't break out of. Here in America, you could break out of that and you could have achievement. That's why they came and why we're here today, and now why new immigrants come to this country. And the important thing to keep in mind is that prejudice is something that we see in lots of different ways, and particularly when it's directed to a particular ethnic group, it's a form not just of the violence that's done, but the intimidation that creates a climate to suppress those individuals being able to pursue their interests as the way everyone else does. We make a stand against prejudice against anybody. We make a stand against prejudice against people who hate someone because of their religion, if they're Jewish or they're Muslim or they're Catholic or they're Protestant, whatever that is. If there's an attack on a person because of their religion, that's wrong. If there's an attack on a person because of the color of their skin, whatever it is, that's wrong. If there's an attack on a person because of their age, either generalizing because somebody's older or generalizing because somebody's younger, that's wrong. Our policies are to judge people by the content of their character, by how they behave. When they function in a proper way in the society, they should have the freedom of movement and the opportunity to achieve what they can achieve. That's what we believe in. And we don't believe in suppressing that because of those external situations, as we have seen in every possible demographic group. There are people of wonderful demeanor who want to live in harmony with their brothers and sisters, and there are other people that are here to do bad things. That's why we have a police department. That's why we have a correctional department. That's why we have a probation department. We need those tools to deal with individuals whose behavior is antisocial and manifested in some particular way. So hopefully we will be able to make a stand against Asian American hatred and hatred against any particular ethnic group. In fact, hatred against any and all ethnic groups, that we stand together as one family. Not easy to do. Attitudes harden and can be very difficult to change. But we are going to do what we can do to try to use public education and to try to outreach to show that there is unity amongst all of us being together as Americans, and that this country is so great that it can absorb different traditions, relish those traditions, and still, at the end of the day, all of us be Americans together. And that's what we strive for, and that's what we hopefully will achieve here, certainly in Westchester County, to the best of our ability. I want to mention in closing that this week is Sunshine Week. It's a name that's been attached to educating the public or reminding the public about the importance of open government, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and the ability for individuals to access information properly, openly, without secrecy, and to do that in a professional way. There are hundreds of media organizations, civic groups, libraries, nonprofits, schools, a host of other entities that are participating in discussions about these very topics. Tonight, there's a couple of Zooms that I saw on my calendar from some different organizations to discuss these things. And now that we have social media, even more dialogue about what represents open government. We have laws that access freedom of information to documents, that require public meetings to be held in the public, and only for a handful of reasons can those legislative bodies legislate in private. This government functions best when it's done and operated in the open. Now, we also have, through social media now, a wide variety of voices in the public square, and those voices are allowed for free speech. But I worry that under the guise of journalism comes disinformation, comes people whose mission is not to openly cover or fairly report on things, but to advance an agenda, and to do so in a way that makes people think they're being objective, but in fact, they're issuing a point of view. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can't hide it. You can't hide behind that you're being an objective journalist. So we're going to try our very best to be open and to be fair with everyone who wishes to have open and fairness. But when we see people that want to hide behind the freedom of press and to use that as an opportunity to advance their point of view, then we look at them not as members of the journalistic community, nor as citizens of One Information, but people that are trying to advance an agenda. And we've seen examples of that all across the country, much less in our backyard. And we're very sincere about being open, and we're also very sincere about rooting out those who determine that they're going to hide behind what is open and what is fair in order to do whatever their agenda is. And I think that open transparency is clear. We've had some discussions and debates in the press that have been disagreements, but fair disagreements and open disagreements, and we welcome that in the future. But we also know that we have to govern, and we have to govern in a way that solves problems. We're not afraid to take criticism. We're also not afraid to take praise if any comes our way, and we're not afraid to stand up for what we believe. And we're not afraid to call out the actors who are bad actors in this as well. With that, we'll see if there are any questions. We have one question from a friend in the press.
Yep, we have one question from Martin Wilbur, and he would like to know, has there been an uptick in reported incidents targeting Asian Americans in the county? Are there certain areas of the county that are being watched more closely?
Well, I think, what Chief Hodges said is that there's an outreach effort to be made in the moment, because of the recent incidents, less just in Westchester, more generally in the New York metropolitan area, more generally nationwide, for examples of Asian American activity, prejudicial activity against Asian Americans. We've seen prejudicial activities against a host of different groups: anti-Semitism against the Jewish community, efforts against the Muslim community, efforts against the Hispanic community. And so, unfortunately, prejudice doesn't stop at one particular dotted line, and it progresses across. I don't believe there's a particular geography in Westchester County that we're watching. The Asian American community, while it may have a couple of pockets here or there, is pretty widely spread out across the county, and you'll see some communities have a higher percentage of Japanese Americans, some a higher percentage of Chinese Americans. But it isn't clustered in the way that might say, here's the geography and here's where the issues are coming from. We had a prominently reported incident that happened a week ago in downtown White Plains in the early evening, where a man physically assaulted a woman. The woman is Asian American. She is also a senior citizen, advanced age in her 80s, and she was pushed to the ground and punched by a younger man. That incident is being investigated. The DA is investigating it as a hate crime. At some point in time, when their investigation is complete, they'll reveal whatever they studied and learned. And we don't know the motivation until that's been identified. It could be anti-Asian hatred. It could be, a younger person assaulting an older person. That's an age-related thing. It could be male-female because she was unable to defend herself as an older woman. It could be all of those things, and it could also be the individual themselves and what their track record of behavior has been. But we treat them as potential issues, and therefore we try to publicly educate against those prejudices to try to see if we can step out and deal with them. And as we do before we go into the Jewish holiday seasons, the High Holy Days in the fall and Passover in the spring, our Public Safety Department reaches out to the synagogues to try to discuss additional security methods so that we can try to be helpful. We do the same with the various Christian communities and at various times of Muslim holidays as well, to make sure that we're doing whatever can be done in coordination to anticipate or prevent any of those actions. At this point, we're mindful that there have been more incidents against the Asian American community, and that's why we've taken some of these additional efforts. That's the last question. Only question. Okay, very good. Well, thank you for watching. We'll be back next Monday to give another update at 2 o'clock. We'll give you whatever progression is. Hopefully we'll see some additional progress in the reduction of the infection. Hopefully we'll see continued additional vaccinations, which we think will put us in the right path. If we have any new announcements from the state, policies that may change, we'll share those at this time. And hopefully you'll have a safe weekend and a good weekend. This is only Thursday, so the weekend doesn't begin quite yet. But we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you very shortly. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.